welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Indy if you just see my face for the first time. On this channel, we talk about so many things. We talk about self-care, self-development and improvement, and also motherhood. I'm a mom of two beautiful kids, and today we're talking motherhood. There's something nobody really prepares you for when you become a mother. Everyone prepares you for the sleepless night, tell you about the crying, the diaper, the breastfeeding, the tantrums, the first day of school, the teenage years, but nobody really prepares you for the moments when you look at your child and suddenly realize, oh my God, you're becoming your own person. And somehow that can be harder than the sleepless night, because when they are little, you feel like you are their whole world. They need you for everything. You choose what they eat, you choose what they wear, you decide where they go, you hold their hands when they cross the road, you solve their problems, you kiss their cheeks and be like, you're practically everything for them. And then slowly something starts to change. They start having opinions, they start questioning you, they start wanting privacy, they start making their own choices, they start becoming independent. And as beautiful as that is, it can also be really uncomfortable for a mother. Motherhood isn't just about raising children, it's also about learning how to slowly let go of the little person you once had complete control over and making peace with the person they are becoming. So today I want to talk about 5 things I wish someone told me before my children started getting older. And if you're a mother with young children, I really want you to listen to this, because some of these things may not make sense to you yet, but one day they will. Parenting doesn't get easier, it just gets different. The first thing I wish someone had told me is parenting doesn't necessarily get easier. It's just different. When your children are babies, you're exhausted because they physically need you all the time. You're feeding them, you're bathing them, you're changing them, putting them to sleep, carrying them, and then you think that once they can do these things by themselves, they're going to have your love back. Then they grow. And yes, they can dress themselves, they can make some of their own food, they can shower themselves, they can go to school without you holding their hand. But suddenly, the things you're dealing with are no longer things you can fix with a hug or a snack. The problem gets more complicated. Friendships become important, school becomes more complicated, the emotions become more complicated, their confidence, their self-esteem, their identity, the things they are exposed to, the people they are becoming. And then you start realizing, oh, so this is what parenting older children looks like. You don't necessarily have to have less responsibilities. You just have a different kind of responsibility. When they're little, you're protecting their bodies. As they get older, you're also trying to protect their minds. And that's a completely different kind of parenting. You can't always see what's happening. You can't always solve the problems. And sometimes they won't even tell you what the problem is. And that's one of the hardest transitions, because when they are little, if something is wrong, they'll cry. You knew, now they can say, I'm fine. And you're looking at them like, we are absolutely not fine. But they won't talk. And now you have to learn how to be present without forcing your way in. That's a completely different skill. So if you're currently in the baby or toddler stage and you're thinking, once they get older, this is going to be much easier, it probably will be easier in some ways, but don't expect motherhood to become effortless. The challenges change, and honestly, so do you. You become a different kind of mother. You become less of a manager and more of a guide, less of a fixer and more of a listener, less of someone who says, do this because I said so, and more of someone who says, let's talk about why this matters. And if you ask me, I'll say that's one of the biggest shifts in motherhood. Your children need you differently as they grow. The second thing I wish I understood earlier is that your children don't stop needing you. They just stop needing you in the same way. And this one can really mess with you emotionally, because when your child is small, their needs for you is obvious. Mommy, come. Mommy, help me. Mommy, carry me. Mommy, look at this. Mommy, I need you. And you hear your name approximately 400 times a day. Sometimes you're thinking, please just give me 5 minutes. But then they grow. And suddenly, they are not calling you every 5 minutes. They are doing things themselves. And at first, you're relieved. Then one day you realize, wait, why don't you need me like you used to? But here's what I've learned. They still need you. They just need a different version of you. When they are younger, they need your hands. When they are older, they need your wisdom. When they are younger, they need you to hold them. When they are older, they need you to hear them. When they are younger, you tell them what to do. When they are older, you help them learn how to make decisions. And that transition requires you to pay attention, because if you're still parenting your 12-year-old like a 5-year-old, you are going to have lots of conflicts. And it's not necessarily because your child has suddenly become difficult. It's because their needs have changed. They are developing their own personality. They are developing independence. They're learning how to think. They're learning how to make choices. And sometimes they need you to just step back. Not because they don't love you, not because they don't respect you, but because growing up means learning how to stand on your own. And I think one of the most beautiful things a mother can learn is this: my child becoming independent is not my child abandoning me. Those are two completely different things. Sometimes we take their independence personally. They want their own room, they want to choose their own clothes, they want to make their own decisions. They don't want you hovering around them and you think, what's happening? What's happening is this. They are growing, your job is to grow with them. You have to let go of control. This one is hard because as mothers, we spend years controlling things. We control what they eat, what they watch, where they go, who they play with, when they sleep, what they wear, how they behave. And when they are little, that's very necessary. They need boundaries, they need structure, they need adults making decisions for them. But eventually, you have to start handing some of that control back. And this is where motherhood gets uncomfortable because you know that if you do something for them, you probably do it better. You know how to organize the bag, you know how to prepare the outfit, you know how to remember the assignment, you know how to make sure they don't forget something, you know how to prevent certain mistakes. But here is the problem. If you prevent every mistake, you also prevent them from learning. And I think this is one of the hardest things for mothers to accept. Sometimes your child has to forget something. Sometimes they have to make a bad choice. Sometimes they have to experience disappointment. Sometimes they have to realize, oh, mom was right. And you don't even have to say, I told you so, because life already told them. There's a difference between protecting your child and controlling your child's entire experience. And as they grow, you have to move from control to guardians. You can say, I don't think this is a good idea, and here's why. But eventually, they have to learn how to make decisions. Because what happens when they're adults? You won't always be standing next to them. You won't always be there to call their employer. You won't be able to solve every friendship problem. You won't be able to prevent every heartbreak. You won't be able to make every decision for them. So the goal is not to raise a child who always makes decisions you would make. The goal is to raise someone who can make decisions when you're not there. And that requires letting go. Little by little, not all at once. You give them that age appropriate responsibility. You allow them solve problems. You let them experience consequences. You allow them think. You allow them try. You allow them fail. And yes, sometimes you're going to sit there watching them make a mistake and everything in you is screaming, stop! But you have to ask yourself, is this dangerous or is it just uncomfortable for me? Because those are not the same thing. If it's dangerous, step in. If it's simply uncomfortable because you would have done it differently, sometimes you need to learn to let them learn. You are raising people who won't always agree with you. This one surprised me because when your children are little, you're basically their favorite person. You say, let's go, they go. You say, wear this, they wear. You say, don't touch that. They don't. And then they develop opinions. And suddenly you're having an actual debate in your own house. You say, because I said so. And they're looking at you like, but why? And you're thinking, excuse me. But here's the thing, your child disagreeing with you doesn't automatically mean your child is disrespectful. Sometimes it means they are thinking. Now, there's obviously difference between disagreement and disrespect. I'm not saying children should be rude to their parents. Boundaries still matter. Respect still matters. But I don't think our goal is to raise children who never question us because eventually they become adults. And I don't want my children to grow into adults who blindly follow whoever sounds confident. I want them to be able to think. I want them to ask questions. I want them to say, I don't agree, and then explain why. I want them to be able to have conversations with people who see the world differently from them. And sometimes that person will be me, and I have to be okay with that. One of the hardest things about motherhood is realizing your child is not an extension of you. They are their own person. They have different interests, they have different personalities, different opinions, different strengths, different dreams, and they make choices that you wouldn't make. And sometimes you will look at them and think, where did they even get this from? But they are not supposed to be a smaller version of you. They're supposed to become themselves. And your job is not to make them agree with you forever. Your job is to give them values enough that even when they disagree with you, they still know how to navigate life. So when my children disagree with me, I try to remember I don't need to win every conversation. Sometimes I need to listen. Sometimes I need to explain. Sometimes I need to maintain my boundaries. Sometimes I need to admit that you're right. And I think that is one of the most powerful things a parent can say because you're teaching your child that authority doesn't mean we are incapable of being wrong. You have to prepare yourself for the day they don't need you as much. And this is probably the one that hits me the hardest. They are going to leave, not necessarily tomorrow, not necessarily soon, but eventually our children are supposed to build a life that does not revolve around us. They're supposed to grow, they're supposed to become independent, and they're supposed to have their own homes, their own careers, their own relationships, their own routines. And one day you might realize my baby doesn't need me anymore, and that can feel like grief because motherhood takes up so much of your identity. For years, you're somebody's mother before you are anything else. You organize your life around them, their school, their activities, their meals, their holidays, their appointments, their needs, and then they start needing you less. And suddenly you have to ask yourself, who am I when I'm not needed in the same way? I think that's something we need to talk about more, because raising independent children means accepting that there will eventually be a version of motherhood where your child doesn't need you to survive. And that's actually the goal. We just don't always prepare ourselves emotionally for it. We celebrate independence when they are 2. Look, she can feed herself. We celebrate independence when they are 5. Look, he can dress himself. We celebrate independence when they are teenagers. Look, they can go somewhere without me. But eventually, independence becomes mom, I'm moving out. And suddenly you're like, whoa, let's slow that down. But we can't always ask our children to stay small because we are afraid of the empty space their growing up will leave behind. So I think we have to start building our own lives while we are raising them. Keep your friendships, keep your hobbies, take care of yourself, have dreams that belong to you, build something, travel, learn, create, take yourself out, spend time with your partner if you have one, spend time alone, whatever that looks like for you. Because our children should be a beautiful part of our lives, but they shouldn't be the entirety of our lives. This is something I'm becoming more conscious of as my children grow. I want them to become independent. I want them to leave home one day and feel capable. I want them to know how to care for themselves. I want them to build beautiful lives. And when that day comes, I want to be able to say, I'm going to miss you terribly, but I'm proud of you. Not what am I going to do without you, because I've also built a life. So if you're a mother with young children and you're watching this, please enjoy the stage you're in, even the messy parts, even the exhausting parts, because I promise you they change. The baby who won't let you sleep becomes a child who wants to do everything themselves. The child who wants to watch everything becomes a child who wants privacy. The little person who follows you everywhere eventually becomes this person you have to encourage to go into the world. A motherhood becomes less about holding on and more about knowing when to let go. If I could go back and tell my younger self 5 things, I would say parenting doesn't get easier, it gets different. Your children will always need you, but they won't always need you in the same way. You have to learn to let go of control. Your children are allowed to become people who don't always agree with you. And finally, prepare yourself for the day they don't need you as much, because that day isn't a failure of motherhood. It's actually one of the greatest success, because you raise someone who can stand on their own, and maybe that's the whole point. You don't raise children who will need you forever. You raise them so they'll be okay when you're not standing beside them. And honestly, that is one of the hardest and most beautiful parts of being a mother.